to call the meeting to order. Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, those that are able to stand? I pledge allegiance to
to
the
the
flag
flag, of
of
the
the
United
United
States
States
of America,
of America and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic
For
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
one
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 nation,
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 under
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 God,
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
for
for
all.
all. Okay, Kate, would you do the roll call, please?
Certainly. Joe Britton,
Present.
Rachel Chalesky,
Here.
Kate Canetta here, Gladys Cooper,
Here.
Lauren Daly,
Here.
Joe De Silva,
Present.
Catherine Hodgson,
Here.
Rich Janelli,
Here.
Kathy Molinaro,
Here.
Al Russo,
Here.
Amy Spallino.
Here.
Okay. We're gonna go right down the agenda. We had item number 4. We talked about that early. Kate, would you do the motion presented by Mr. Mooney to the group?
I will make a motion that in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, Section 10-157, the Board of Education hereby elects Mr. Kevin Walston to serve as Superintendent of Schools, effective immediately for a term ending June 30th, 2024, and further moves that the Board of Education hereby authorizes its chairperson to sign the related employment contract on behalf of the Board of Education.
Second.
Motion made by Kate, seconded by Joe De Silva. Any discussion before we do the vote?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Rachel.
Oh, thank you. I just want to express that I'm going to support the outcome of the superintendent search committee because it is the right thing to do for the district, and I believe Mr. Walston will continue to do a fine job as he has done. However, I would be remiss if I did not express my dissatisfaction with how certain things were handled throughout the process. Several members requested training at the very beginning of the process, which did not happen. I believe we as a board are due for our own professional development on roles and responsibilities. And I think we should look to incorporate how to strengthen the process to ensure proper protocols are followed in the future. Again, I support Mr. Walston's appointment. I've enjoyed working with him these past few years. I very much look forward to working with him in his new role. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Joe.
First, I'd like to congratulate Kevin. I think he is the right choice for our district. I'm encouraged by this. I too, like Rachel, have enjoyed very much working with Kevin so far. And I think this is a good move for our district. I'm glad we've gotten through this process. I don't necessarily have the same problems with the process Rachel did. That said, we can always do everything better. There's nothing's ever perfect. We can always do it better. I think at the end of the day, we came out with the right result. So congratulations, Kevin. Good luck. You're going to need it.
Thank you,
And
Joe.
thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Mrs. Cooper, Catherine has her hand up.
Okay. Help.
Good evening. In order to do the responsible and ethically and appropriate job for the district, it is with great disappointment that I cannot support the outcome of the superintendent search committee. I must convey my concern over the injustice on how the protocol was handled throughout the process due to the lack of leadership and the outside services that were provided. However, I do wish Mr. Walston the best of luck.
Thank you, Catherine.
I also would like to say something. I would like to congratulate Kevin and look forward to working with you and to continue to working with you. But as Rachel and Catherine have stated, I do have concerns about how this process was, how we went through this process. And I look forward to some professional development for the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, if there's no other discussion, Uh, there's a motion on the floor. It was moved by Kate, seconded by Joe DeSilva. Kate, would you do the roll call?
Gladly. Joe Britton,
Yes.
Rachel Chalesky,
Aye.
Kate Canetta, aye. Gladys Cooper,
Yes.
Lauren Daly,
Aye.
Joe DeSilva,
Aye.
Catherine Hodgson,
Nay.
Rich Janelli,
Aye.
Kathy Molinaro,
Aye.
Al Russo,
Because I wish Mr. Walston success, Kevin, I vote yes.
and Amy Spallino.
Aye.
Okay.
Could you give me the total, Kate?
That is a 10-1 tally.
Thank you. Congratulations to Mr. Walston. As we move through the process, and I've heard several comments about the protocol was not, and we need some professional development. I grant you that. But I also believe that as we start the process, before we even decided that we was going to do one item, I always had some type of advice from either our attorney or someone that knew a little bit more than we do. Okay, do we need professional development? Yes, we do. Okay, and the process, it might not have been the way we wanted. It was not done the way it was done 15 years ago when we hired Dr. Sam, but it was a different group. So we all can learn from that. But I thank you all for your support and moving this issue forward, because we have a lot of educational things that we need to take care of here in this district. And I want to work with everyone. And I hope everyone want to work with each other so we can make this the best district that is. So again, thank you. Congratulations to Mr. Walston. We move on down to the presentation of the 2021-2022 school reopening plan. Mr. Walston.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. And to the Board of Ed, I also want to thank you for your confidence. Thank this amazing community who has been very supportive over these last couple of months as part of this search process. And then, of course, the cabinet, the staff, the team, the principals. Just want to continue to thank them for the great job that they do, and the calls for support throughout this process has been very appreciative, and I'm looking forward to the challenge. I know the district has been stabilized by Dr. Sal's presence for over a decade, and I recognize I'm stepping into big shoes. I have a cabinet, working with the cabinet for these last 3 years. I'm looking forward to my work with them moving forward, but I'm also looking forward to filling out the remaining members of the team to continue to serve this district well. So I am ready to move on with the presentation, Ms. Cooper, but I just want to reiterate my appreciation for the confidence from the board in recommending me for this position.
You are welcome.
So Kara, I believe we have been authorized to move forward with the meeting. Can you present the PowerPoint, and I will begin speaking to the board about our process. Thank you. So one, let me just share, we've had an opportunity all throughout the summer. Quite frankly, this road to reopening started in the spring of 2021 with the cabinet and I, with input and feedback from our school community, feedback from our principals, feedback from our parents during listening forums, information and input from our board as part of the ESSA funding process and how we were going to use these funds to help reopen our schools in the fall. As we got close to the end of the year, the state made it clear that one of our main priorities was to reopen schools for 100% learning in the fall of 2021. So that has been our priority and our focus going into this upcoming school year. As you might recall, we ended the school year last year talking about how we were going to leverage federal monies, specifically ESSA 2 and ESSA 3, how we were going to leverage those funds to hire additional staff particularly at our elementary schools and high school, to make sure that we can socially distance to the greatest extent possible. In addition, we've hired an extensive amount of social emotional support throughout the district to provide that support for students as they return to our buildings on October 30th. We feel like we are well positioned to receive our kids, given all that we've learned about the mitigation strategies that we have in place. We had a great deal of practice in the spring of last year. And I think with that practice, our schools and our principals are well positioned to open up their doors on next Monday, on August 30th. So the presentation we're going to share with you this evening is really a fine tuning of what we initially shared with the community in June. We received feedback. Our cabinet has been meeting on reopening meetings, quite frankly, since May and June and July and August. They go on vacations. We're still meeting and reopening meetings, and we've just been reopening like every day all summer. And then we invited in the greater community on the 16th, I believe it was, of August. At that time, we had close to 40 members of the greater Danbury community, which included some people who are on this call, Cara Prunty, who's been an amazing partner throughout this last year and a half. I feel like she's on our payroll here in Danbury. And then our superhero, Kathy O'Dowd, of course, was on the team as well, all of the members of cabinet. And then, we had teachers, we had principals, we had school-based support team, we had nurses, paraprofessionals, representation from all of these groups, and you'll see some of the names momentarily. And then some familiar names also from last year, Dr. Fong and Dr. Begg, who also lent their hand and lent their expertise to the process. So I just want to speak a little bit more about the process. We shared an initial overview or plan of our reopening plan. Cara, who's our teacher of all teachers, helped to put together a lesson plan for our engagement session with the bigger reopening committee. We had breakout groups, did an amazing job, and Ray Coletti, who's not here tonight, but he's one of our teacher extraordinaires who helped with the breakout groups. We had our meetings remotely. All of our experts in the field gave us feedback to help fine tune our document. I believe our document started in 24 pages. I believe it's 32, 33, 34 pages now. We've got raw feedback from our families and basically told us it wasn't acceptable for our families and it was confusing. And so we fine-tuned it accordingly. We received more feedback from our teachers. We had English teachers who told us we didn't have periods in the right place. And we continued to fine-tune and fine-tune. And then we had teachers who told us the document wasn't declarative enough. And so then we went back again and we fine-tuned it again. And I'm saying all of this to say, number one, the document that we're sharing with you this evening, we feel strongly this is a representation of how the experts in the field, how people who are in front of our kids every day feel like we can open our schools safely. We feel like we have a document that covers everything and anything that we miss. We feel like the document and the plan is a fluid plan. And as we continue to get feedback from our governor, federal guidance and state guidance, we can continue to make adjustments to this document. So I'm saying all of that to say this first slide, this evening, we will not have public speaks as part of the process. Just want to make the community aware. Over the last few weeks, at community forums, district surveys, and direct emails, I personally, I know many of my colleagues have as well, have received many calls and emails regarding masking, remote options for remote learning, full in-person learning, and vaccinations, just to name a few. And I just want to say and take this opportunity to make everyone aware that we deeply value our community's input and want to share with the community that our reopening plan is fluid, and we will continue to update the plan as we receive guidance or orders from our governor, State Department of Education, or the state or local health department. This is an introduction to our reopening plan. At our next regular board meeting, there'll be an opportunity for public comment. And I also want to invite our parents in the community to look at the email on this first page and feel free to reach out to us with any comments or suggestions that you might have. We're ready, Kara. So I will just get started and just reiterate our central belief is that reopening Danbury is an absolute priority for us. Reconnecting kids to academics, activities, arts, and athletics is #1 priority. We've heard about the challenges, the social emotional challenges that our kids had last year. And after getting feedback, and so we tasked the reopening committee to look at feedback from the state health department from the state education department before making any recommendations to the Danbury Board of Ed. And so in here, if you click on here, here's the interim guidance from the State Health Department and also from the State Department of Education. That guidance, much of that language actually lives in our recommended document. Ready, Karen? And so just previously I had mentioned, you'll see here, and this document will live on our website as well. But I just want to thank our community members again for their participation in this process. Karen? And so the document reflects the most recent recommendations from the committee to ensure the health and safety of all of our students, staff, and visitors, use effective mitigation strategies, and by providing high quality instruction for all of our students. So tonight, we will be asking for approval for the plan. And just some context for the community, the government actually requires that we have a safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services. This plan must be made publicly available. And so we will have this as part of our website and then also submitted as part of our ESSA application, which was actually submitted, I believe it was 2 Mondays ago. The overarching goal is to get all of our kids back in school for 100% in-person learning. Karen? All right. And so the reopening committee last met on Monday, August 16th, and made the following recommendations. The recommendations, when approved by the Board of Education, will be finalized. Great. And so there are a number of areas that we'll be discussing, and vaccination is one of our first ones. And so one of the key mitigation strategies and key takeaways from the CDC is to promote vaccination as a leading strategy in the community. We have continued to promote vaccinations in our letters to our parents in our weekly updates. We have a vaccination schedule that's available. I believe the last one was made available this week. And as we continue to have that mobile vaccine in our community, we'll continue to make that available for our parents and students. One of the other things that we have done, and as part of a promotion, as a key strategy for communities, is to partner with your local health department to provide access to vaccinations for families district-wide. And we partnered with our school-based health center, and have also partnered with the city to make sure that these opportunities are available. And so it's because of our partnership with Cara Prunty, who's on this call, we were able to we leveraged that relationship to get the mobile vaccine unit in our district and in our community this summer. And then the last one, and this is most recent order, this executive order is requiring all vaccinations for staff. This is recent as of just last Thursday. The district will start reviewing this expectation with bargaining units as soon as possible. And for more information, this will be made available on the website. And certainly, I know Kim is on this call as well, and Kathy as well. And if there are any questions, we can talk about that later as well. Karen? Mask use. And so the district is requesting that masking be required for all students, staff, and essential visitors, which I'll talk about a little bit later. In every event, we will be making reasonable accommodations for individuals with a disability that prevents mask use. Additionally, there's a current executive order requiring masks in school buildings. Then there's also an order to support mask wearing from the city as well. In addition to masking in buildings, masks are also required on public transportation, including our school buses. Distancing and cohorting. So the cohorting expectation is going to be challenging this year, but I do want to take an opportunity to speak to this. First, we again just reiterate and prioritizing 100% in-person learning, implementing 3-foot social distancing guidelines to the greatest extent possible. I can share with the board and the community tonight. I would say in the majority of our classrooms, we are able to do this. And then of course, in some of our grade levels, we are coming close to it, but not 3 feet. And so in the majority of our elementary classrooms, this is something we've been able to accomplish, given the additional staff that we brought on. In the majority of our high school classrooms, we're able to accomplish the 3-foot social distancing guidelines, given the additional staffing. But at the middle school, just kind of given our constraints at that level, we will not be able to maintain 3-foot distancing necessarily in every single classroom. And so that will continue to be a challenge for us at the middle school. And then and what we've done here, we've added a link here for just more information about C guidance regarding social distancing guidelines. But this is something as in the district we live with for the last 18 months. We feel like we're really good at it now. And again, to the greatest extent possible, we will be at 3 feet. But the guidance, the federal guidance is sharing with districts. It's not a requirement, it's certainly a recommendation. And then they're continuing to encourage us where it's not possible, continue to layer in other mitigation strategies, i.e. make sure your mask is always on, find every opportunity to make sure your kids' hands are clean and make sure you have opportunities to make sure hands are clean, et cetera. Already, Karen. Cleaning, disinfection, and hygiene. And so this speaks to some of those layering the mitigation strategies. And so last year, the board and the community might recall we had Wednesdays off at the beginning of this process when we had our kind of A-B hybrid schedule. And we had crews coming in to work to clean commonly used surfaces, handrails, doorknobs throughout buildings. And what we've learned from the State Health Department, federal guidance, is that contaminated surfaces are not a significant risk for the transmission of SARS-CoV-2. Therefore, routine daily cleaning of all school areas is sufficient. Detergent-based cleaning will be used on all occupied areas of schools and buses on a daily basis. And so the need to do that in between bus runs is not as urgent as it was before. However, we will, for our rooms, we still maintain isolation rooms in our schools. We'll still encourage our custodial staff to clean and disinfect our restrooms, and health offices will also continue to be clean and disinfected on a regular basis. Great, thank you. And so screen testing is a mitigation strategy that's been highly recommended by the CDC. The district has decided to participate in this process, but it does require parent permission. And I'm gonna ask Kathy O'Dowd to jump in to provide an opportunity to just kind of walk you through this, but also educate you a little bit about the process.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Good evening, everyone. So the State Department of Health had approached the districts in regard to participating in this free program in which we would be offered a weekly screening for students, focusing really on those who are not able to be vaccinated yet, which is that K-6 grade level. We will be partnered with a lab who will come on a weekly basis to our schools to perform what we call pool test, pool screening. So what that is, it's a group sample. So this is a voluntary program and it will require parent consent. And the school nurses will be, once we've partnered with our lab, I haven't been assigned a lab partner yet. The state anticipates that will happen next week. This is a program we look to start probably mid-September. And when we have the volunteers who will participate in this, it will be a weekly sample each classroom. So it is a nasal swab. It's just anterior nasal swab. It's not a deep nasopharyngeal. So the Q-tip really just goes inside the opening of the nose. And all of those samples are placed in one tube, and that's the pool. The lab will turn around that testing time within 24 hours. And if any member of that pool tests positive, what they will do is then an individual test, a PCR, to identify who that positive person is. So it's really just a one-time visit. There won't be a need to have a second. They will have all these samples that they need on that weekly basis. And then we will be notified if anyone has tested positive. So the goal of this program is really for us to be able to identify cases, most likely that would be asymptomatic, sooner. And then, that's just another mitigation strategy that we have. The school nurses will help by sending home the consent forms. And as I said, the testing will be conducted by the lab. And we have decided to trial this to see, first of all, how many will participate and the type of results that we get from it. So at this point, the testing will only be for students. The goal is to really reach that group. We may move that on to staff, but that's not been decided yet by the state. So for right now, it's K-6 students on a weekly basis.
Kathy, can I ask a question quick about that?
Sure.
It seemed, and I know this by experience, I have a daughter going into 7th grade who's not yet 12, so she's not actually vaccination eligible yet. Is this K-6 or is this any student who's not vaccinated?
Right now, they are focusing on the K-6 program.
Okay. Is that not recognizing that there's at least some children in grade 7 that aren't eligible for vaccine?
We can look at that, Joe.
Just an idea.
Yeah, no, and certainly once I'm assigned the lab, I have direct communication with them.
Okay.
So that's certainly something that I can discuss with them. Yeah.
I only have it, and it's only for me. It's only for a very short time, so it won't be a big deal for long. But that thought came to me when I saw the.
Thank you for that, and I will certainly.
Thanks. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question, please.
Mhm.
Hi, Kathy. So I thought in one of the previous screens, Kevin said that there's an executive order that vaccinations are required for all staff, and yet
Right.
here in your third bullet, program screening is for unvaccinated students and staff.
So the mandate for the vaccine came out after the pool testing information went out.
Okay.
So the weekly screenings for those staff under the new vaccine requirement who will not be vaccinated will not be eligible. They've spelled it out in the guidance that they will have to do that testing on their own.
Okay, thank you.
I will make the update, Kathy.
Yeah, the vaccine guidance just came out this afternoon. So I read it, we're digesting it, and as a team, we'll have to look at how that will work. And Kim can comment more on that.
Kathy, you have the floor for the next 2 slides, just a reminder.
Okay. Any other questions on the pool testing? No? Okay, so we'll move on. These are all links to the COVID-19 student screening form. We are still asking parents as well as staff to screen themselves for illness before coming into school. And we have links to the English, Spanish, and Portuguese versions there. We are reminding parents, please do not send your child to school if they were sick, even if it's something you think is just the sniffles or a little cold. I can tell you with the Delta variant that is presenting more respiratory with just cold symptoms. So we are, just as we were last year, any child who exhibits any signs of illness, be it headache, stomachache, cold, they should not come to school. And if those symptoms develop in school, they will have to be picked up. And I'll talk about the requirements. Addendum 5 will be updated by the state hopefully next week. But basically, if someone is ill and can't come to school, or if they are sent home, it's going to require either a negative COVID test or a note from the healthcare provider with an alternate diagnosis in order for them to return. And we have to be very strict with these guidelines. We've worked hard to get back full time, and we want to keep our doors open. So we will be monitoring that very closely. In in regard to the contact tracing notification protocol, that will be unchanged from last year. Should there be an exposure that we are notified about in school, all direct contacts will be notified by a robocall and letter, just as they were last year, that red alert COVID-19.
Kathy, I think we just lost your audio.
Well, looks like she has a lot to say. There we go.
I'm sorry?
We lost you for about 60 seconds, Kathy.
Oh,
we couldn't hear you.
Okay, I apologize.
Dashboard, we didn't hear anything about the dashboard, if that's what you're talking about.
That's where I was getting to next.
Okay.
Did you hear about the robocalls and the general notification letters?
No.
Oh, okay, so I'll start back on the contact tracing process. I apologize. So if there is a known case that we're notified about in school, all direct contacts will be notified by a robocall and letter. It will be that red alert quarantine message, and parents will be asked to check their email for the instructions on quarantining and where they can go for testing. Then a general notification letter will go out. I'll provide that to all principals, and that will just be notifying the staff and families from that school that a case has been identified and all the direct contacts have been notified. And then as of Monday, our Danbury Public Schools COVID-19 dashboard, which is on our homepage, will be activated again. And I will be updating that on a daily basis, as well as reporting any positive cases to the State Department of Health. And then as we move on, we'll see the quarantine guidelines on the next slide. Okay. So when it comes to quarantining, we have some new guidance due to the fact that we now have students and staff who have been eligible to be vaccinated. So we'll start with person A. So any person who tests positive for COVID-19, regardless of their vaccine status, and if they have symptoms, they will isolate until the following requirements have been met. It will be a 10-day quarantine isolation from the first time the symptoms have appeared. They need to be 24 hours fever-free without the use of fever-reducing medications such as Tylenol or Advil before they can come out of their quarantine. And if they do not have any symptoms, which we call asymptomatic, they will isolate for 10 days from the date of the first positive test. They will continue to self-monitor, and they will be released from isolation after 10 days has passed, as long as no symptoms have developed. Then we move on to person B. So in this scenario, any vaccinated student or staff who is exposed to a COVID positive person and they are asymptomatic, which means they have no symptoms, they will not have to quarantine. They do need to have a COVID test 3 to 5 days after their exposure, but teachers will be able to report to work. Students will be able to come to school as long as they have no symptoms. This guidance requires wearing a mask in all public places for 14 days. But as we know now, for example, in Danbury, masks are required in public places at all times. And they will continue to self-monitor their symptoms for 14 days. Should they become symptomatic during this period of time, they would need to repeat the COVID test, and all test results should be reported to the school nurse. And then we have person C. So any unvaccinated student or staff who is exposed to a COVID-19 positive person, they quarantine for 10 days following the date of last exposure. And this is unchanged from last year. They will still have a COVID test 3 to 5 days after that date of last exposure. Test results will be reported to the school nurse. They will self-monitor for symptoms. And we always encourage parents to contact the primary care provider and staff as well. They have questions or concerns. Okay. And we have one slight change to the close contact information and definitions. So direct or close contact exposure is still defined as 15 minutes or more in a 24-hour period. Adult direct close contact distance remains within 6 feet of the positive person. Now there's a slight
We lost
Kathy,
you, Kathy.
sorry.
Yeah.
only students. Masks need to be consistently and
Kathy, we lost you for about 60 seconds again.
Oops, so sorry.
Don't be Kathy.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I apologize. Should I start?
You left off with the difference between the adults and the children.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
So the adult direct contact is still 6 feet, 15 minutes within a 24-hour period. So the exception is any student seated 3 feet away from a positive case will not need to quarantine if the exposure was limited to the classroom only, masks are consistently and correctly worn, and the contact person is asymptomatic. So this applies again to the classroom only. I can see this working at the middle and high school level. You know, the goal is that we do not want to have to quarantine an entire class if we don't have to. At the elementary level, although we may have the 3-foot distancing, there are times during the day where the masks are off in the class. The students will have their breakfast, snack, and sometimes lunch in the classroom. So that erases the masks worn consistently and all day long. But at the middle and high school levels where they're changing classes and they are stationary in their seats wearing masks for the period that they're in there, we will be able to do that 3-foot definition.
Kathy, I have a question real quick, and this may not be for you. Are at least at the elementary level, are we still using the desk shields like we used last year?
Yes.
We are. Okay.
Yes. So the desk shields will be used. If the children are having snack or lunch and their masks are off, they can use the desk shields then, yes.
Well, query, we were using desk shields routinely throughout the day last year, correct?
They won't be
in the classroom.
Yeah, it's been determined that that's not necessary, and for some of the desks, it didn't really fit well, and it was really, interfering with learning. So we are only using those now when masks are off in the classroom.
Yeah, and Joe, there's also some thoughts out there that as we encourage airflow in our classrooms, that the shields on a desk are actually prohibiting the airflow that we need in the classrooms. And so our stance on this is when kids are eating and have a snack and the masks are off, we will have the shields up.
Okay.
And so whether that's snack time in the elementary classrooms or in our cafeterias, the shields will be up. But otherwise, the most important mitigation strategy will be masks throughout the school day. So that's the reason for the switch primarily.
Okay.
No evidence necessarily to suggest that they've been effective, and then two, the idea that it's prohibiting, the airflow that we need to encourage right now during these times.
Okay, thank you. It just seemed that I wanted to ask because obviously we've reduced our distances. We may not be making 3 feet, and the current iteration of COVID seems to be more contagious for kids. So but that logically makes sense. If it's affecting the airflow and we're all wearing masks, then that's okay.
Right. Yeah, the mask is the more important strategy.
For sure.
So in terms of determining whether it's going to be a 3-foot definition or a 6, that will be determined by the school nurse as she talks with the teachers in consultation with me. So we will determine at that point whether the quarantine will be the 3-foot or the 6-foot. Okay. Any questions on that?
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay.
So the next 4 slides, we're asking Dr. Casimiro to speak to these slides. They're all specifically related to instruction in our classrooms.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. And congratulations to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. That wasn't me.
So as far as the quarantine goes, we wanted to make sure that students have a way to still stay connected to what is happening in the classroom. And so Leading into the last couple of weeks, we determined that we did have enough of funding within our ESSER 3 funds to support some additional instructional supports and coordination at the building level. So first, I just want to say that all of our teachers heading into this year will continue the use of Google Classroom to post the week-long overviews, the lesson plans, the resources that folks have been accustomed to seeing on a daily basis and over the course of the week. And so any student, regardless of quarantine, even if they're home with the sniffles, may access the Google Classroom on a daily basis to make sure that they're keeping up with their assignments. And we have some special supports in place for students who will be in quarantine, and I'll talk about those in a second. So students who've been officially identified as quarantine will be contacted within 24 hours by a new person who will designate as a school quarantine liaison. And the SQL, as we're calling them, not to be confused with the SQL report for those of you who are into databases and computers and spreadsheets. The SQL will communicate the attendance and social emotional check-in procedures to students at home and make sure that we're connecting to those students during the day. And so this is a person who will set an attendance check-in time, usually right at the conclusion of the day. This will likely be one of our own certified teachers, staff members that will be designated to do this right at dismissal to make sure that they're checking in with the students who are in quarantine. And this is all subject to whether or not the student is asymptomatic and is feeling fine and well enough to do this. But we will have someone reaching out to those students and to connect with them on a daily basis for each day that they are in quarantine. For students to be more present during the quarantine, they will have to attend the check-in at the designated time and also complete at least 50% of their classwork to the best of their ability and make sure that they're reaching out and connecting with their teachers. Again, only the students who are required to quarantine have to do this and engage in these social emotional check-ins. In addition to this, we have designated, we've just actually posted for positions to have certified staff members at the elementary level, middle school level, and high school level that'll be available for support in the core subject areas for students who may need to help with some of the assignments that have been posted during the day and to just kind of keep up with what's happening in the classroom. So we're excited to offer both this school quarantine liaison position, one for each school that will help to communicate and coordinate this and reach out to our students, but then also to have certified staff available to our students who will be at home should they need to do so. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, this one is about the performing arts. And so, as you know, last year we had to make some modifications to the programming as we have done. Still, it makes most sense to have as many performing or high moving activities outdoors where practical. We still have lots of tents that have been, folks have utilized some of those to take advantage of additional outdoor space where feasible in the performing arts world. Extending distancing by 6 feet or more is recommended. Anywhere where there's increased respiration, wind instruments, singing, high exertion dance, and you'll see the same recommendations along the PE lines as well. Droplet control measures are should be implemented during activities with increased respiration and bell covers for wind instruments and what we call instrumental PPE. Which our department chair, Jill Russell, did an amazing job securing grants and funding to get some additional PPE for our students so they can continue to play. Next slide, please. And similar to what I just mentioned, wind instrument in particular and singing outdoor remains the safest place to practice instruments. The PPE as recommended, and of course the continued hygiene, good hand washing and sanitization when using the instruments before and after, and just maintaining that good clean hygiene with all of our instruments and art supplies and any items that the students are touching. Next, please. Thank you. Excited to say that we will be returning to regular distribution of sharing books and materials. This was a big issue last year that made it difficult. Our teachers did an amazing job with regulating that and providing opportunities for kids. But at the same time, it made it a little bit more difficult. So we're happy to be able to go back to our regular distribution and checking out of books. And all clubs and activities are going to resume in person this fall, but we're still not allowing any food sharing, and that's just good part of the good hygiene practice at this time. And Kevin, I believe you have cafeterias?
Yes, I will jump back in. Thank you, Kara.
Yep.
And so I know there was a question earlier about desk shields. So in our cafeterias and in our classrooms where students have snacks, we want to ensure masking is in place after consuming food and beverages, whether that's the cafeteria or in our classrooms. We've asked all of our principals to make sure there are barriers on our cafeteria tables as an additional mitigation strategy to the greatest extent possible. And so we have ordered clear barriers, plastic barriers for cafeteria tables throughout the district. And then in some schools or classrooms where students will eat in the class, those same barriers will be offered and available for classrooms during mealtime. We will continue with plans to offer outside feeding at the high school. For those of you who have maybe been to the school recently, we have tents outside of the cafeteria, outside of the building. We will be asking Mr. Donovan to join us hopefully at our first board meeting to just give an update on how things are going so far. But we are excited that we're able to separate and socially distance our students at the high school. And as long as the weather cooperates, we'll continue to have students inside and outside to spread kids out. Desk shields, as I mentioned earlier, will be available in all our cafeterias for district-wide for student use. And we will continue to encourage hand washing and the use of sanitizers throughout the school day, particularly after eating. Hey, Kara. Visitors. And so until further notice, parent meetings will continue to take place remotely or virtually. We will maintain our regular sign-in procedure to ensure accuracy for contact tracing protocol. The public is not likely aware, but we do have supervisors and district office staff moving from building to building. We have our teachers who teach fine arts and other subjects, special ed staff. A lot of our staff members are shared throughout different schools. And so we continue to ask them to maintain regular sign-in procedures in the event we have a positive case so that we can contact trace appropriately. Open house and school-wide parent events will remain virtual and outdoors where the parents have made provisions for outdoor seating. Until further notice, non-essential visitors will not be permitted into schools. But I do want to speak briefly about essential visitors. This is something that is continuing to change and evolve, but the essential visitors that provide a service to students in schools, such as student nurses, interns, vendors, contract service providers, will be required to follow the policies and procedures set forth in our reopening plan. And for those where appropriate, particularly vendors and contract service providers, we are asking them to submit their own safety plan for the group of students they might be working with. And then, because we want some evidence that they're adhering to the practices and the policies set forth in this plan. And so that plan will be submitted to the district. Where appropriate, all of these cases I'll be reviewing with Kathy O'Dowd. If there is if it's related to sports, we certainly would involve CHIP. If it's a public event and we have a lot of community participation, we will ask for input from Kara Prunty's office, the local health department. So we feel like we have a pretty good protocol in place to help protect our school community, but just to also make sure anyone who comes and works with our students, they have a safety plan in place as well that's consistent with our own reopening plan. Kara? School buses, recess.
Wait.
Yes, Amy. You want us to go back to the previous slide?
Yeah, do you mind?
Sure.
I am the board liaison for DSABC, and we're having a meeting tomorrow night, and they always ask me what's the latest. So does this mean, are they considered essential visitors, the mentoring program, or not?
Yes, and DSABC would similarly. Kara, can you click on the click here button? And so we would be working with the person in charge of the program. And so let's just say they have a lot of mentors working with students, and we will be asking them, how are they going to ensure when they're meeting with kids, if they're doing this in person. And then, we may deem that it's more appropriate to meet with kids virtually, but if it is in person, they would need to include in here what strategies are they going to ensure that masking is in place? What strategies are they going to use to make sure social distance is in place? After you're done with your meeting, how are you going to encourage hand washing? Can you continue down, Kara? Thank you. And then there are a couple of areas here also about, if appropriate, disinfecting the space after you're done, but also contact tracing. So in the event we do have a positive case, make sure there's some kind of record of what students that you've met with. And so it would, anyone who we're working with is going to be working with our kids. They're going to be required to answer these questions. So in the event we have a case, Kathy O'Dowd can put her hands on who the child met with. Was that person vaccinated or not vaccinated? All of those answers will be readily available because we have a plan in place. So as an example, Amy, these are the things that we would rely on. And then underneath, there will be a place for my office or designee to sign off on a request.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Next slide, Karen. And so school buses, recess, and phys ed. So in our school buses, and I think I mentioned this earlier, masking is required on all public transportation, including school buses. We will open bus windows to improve ventilation, and we will work with the bus company to make sure windows are open. We will, to the best and to the greatest extent possible, we will have control loading and unloading on buses because it's certainly recommended. I think given our success with this last year, I think this is something we can continue to do where possible, particularly at our elementary level. We would try to have assigned seating and try to keep kids cohorted on buses, also to the greatest extent possible. During recess and phys ed, masks are not needed for outdoor recess or phys ed. We're certainly going to continue to encourage distancing and promoting hand hygienes before and after outdoor activities. Our principals are well aware of what this looks like. They had a lot of practice last year. And so we'll have hand sanitizers at doors, but mostly we're going to encourage students to wash their hands when they go back and come back into their classrooms from outdoor activities. And then certainly it's recommended that 6 feet or more is recommended where increased respiration is likely. And so if our kids are running around outside during recess, to the greatest extent possible, we want them to be 6 feet or more apart. We understand there are going to be times when they get closer, but the important thing is that they're outside and they're not inside for these activities. Next slide, Karen. And then sports, and I've asked our athletic director to join us for this slide. And I also understand if there might be questions at the end for sports, because I know we have a lot of families that have kids that are participating in extracurricular activities. Jeff?
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, everybody. We were fortunate. We followed the CIAC, everything the CIAC mandates, they put us, and we follow along. 2 weeks ago, CIAC came out with a statement that fall sports will go on as scheduled, and that's the approach we are taking. Our teams have begun training as early as August 12th. We have another bunch of teams starting tomorrow, so we'll be up and running close to full capacity as soon as early next week. Masks, for the most part, about 80% of our program in the fall is outside, so we're really in good shape with that. The indoor programs, girls volleyball, swimming, cheerleading, masks, they have to wear masks, and because it's a mandate in school buildings, we don't think that's going to be much of a problem. In fact, they wore them last year, and we did very well with that as well. Public transportation, we've had a couple of trips. We're going to work very hard to, and Kevin mentioned about loading and unloading, number of athletes on a bus. We have to wear masks. And our coaches have been, very good about that, and we're going to keep pushing toward that. We have roughly 500 or so athletes. We're actually, our numbers in participants are fast approaching where we were 2 years ago. So we're going to be up near full capacity with the kids participating. We work diligently weekly with the CIAC. In fact, we meet next week almost weekly to talk about different policies, changes, different things coming down from the governor's office, et cetera. So we're in tune with everything that's going on, and moving toward the start of this fall season, we're in pretty good shape as we move toward it. Any questions?
Thank you, Chip. Kara, the next slide. So our next few slides speak to our focus priorities to reopening our schools. The majority of them are going to speak to our academic priorities. And so I've asked Kara and Kelly to speak to these last remaining slides, and then open it up for any questions that you might have.
Sure.
Kara?
Thank you, Kevin. With ESSER funding, we've been able to secure some opportunities to purchase a few additional resources that not only serve us well right now in this transition, but also in the future. And I'll talk about those on the next slides. But from an instructional priority standpoint, this year we will have a deliberate focus on the priority standards, grade level standards, and focusing really on the instructional depth over breadth. And what that means is many people hear the term acceleration, and what it doesn't mean is going faster with the curriculum to try to squeeze it all in. It really means to have a deliberate, thoughtful approach to looking at the highest leverage standards that a grade level that is offered at a grade level, and really making sure that students master those standards before next year. It also means looking at the previous grade level to see what grade level standards really needed to be circled back on and reinforced, so that there's a successful staircase of instructional complexity that helps to move students along to the next grade level. So our teachers were hearing a lot about acceleration this year, and really making deliberate choices to make sure that students are engaged through high quality text selection, but to also make sure that we're choosing things in the curriculum that will really position our students well and to spend the most amount of time there. And so our department chairs, our supervisors, our curriculum administrators are working hard to repace some units, and to also focus a lot of the department time in meetings in professional learning communities to help teachers make those deliberate choices across the year. Of course, we're going to continue to provide student supports where needed. We have some additional funding to do so. And so some of that will probably start up at the end of September, early October, with some additional after school opportunities, mostly virtual. We have some wonderful technology now that allows more teachers to be able to access more students in before and after school hours. So we're excited about that. And we have purchased some resources to help students and teachers access critical grade level content, but at multiple Lexile levels. So Lexile level is typically the reading level with which a child is able to access content. And so besides the increasing student engagement, we're going to be focusing on hands-on projects, problem-based learning, all things to increase that engagement level with our students. And again, bolstering enrichment and after-school tutoring supports, and particularly focusing on some of our second language learners who probably were most affected by the pandemic last year and into this year. Next slide, please. And so some of the resources, we won't go into detail on all of these, but we purchased a large amount of resources that are flowing into the schools now. Do the Math, which is a great math program. It's intervention for both our student support specialists, resources, as well as our teachers. Our training is being focused on right now in the first couple of days before school starts. Illustrative Mathematics, which is a program that we're looking to kind of move in K-12. We're rolling that out K2. It's a program that we've had our eye on for quite a while. And now we had some of the resources to be able to bring it in. It's a highly accessible math program. Gibble's reading assessment, our ability to assess students in greater detail at the K-5 level so that we can make better instructional decisions. SIPS intervention kits, these are, again, reading intervention kits, more resources for the teachers to target very specifically instruction that's needed. Some Orton Gillingham reading training program, that is more training for teachers to help diagnose and prescribe issues with reading and to teach reading. Open SciEd training, this is to bolster our science programming. Newsella Pro, this is actually, I should be at the 9-12 level, not K-12, but that's current events and multiple text sets at multiple reading levels so that teachers can more easily differentiate for students. And of course, we have been throughout all of this, continue to focus on our Academy program and pathway development training. We completed some of that over the summer. You may have heard of that in the summer update that Mr. Walston provided. That was very successful. And as of even just today, we started effective teaming training with all of our grade 9 teachers, and they'll also be exposed to the college curriculum that they'll be implementing very soon in just a few short years. We'll be moving through in the next year or two project-based learning training. Again, that's about engagement and that's about student-centered learning. We were able to buy a host of musical instruments to bolster our department, our growing musical department, which is wonderful, and also adding some of those books to the class libraries, which we've been wanting to do for several years. And of course, we, through attrition, lost some texts during the pandemic as we sent some books home, and a few didn't come back. So we're happy to be able to bolster some of those classroom libraries. Next slide, please. In terms of staffing supports, again, through ESSER, we were able to add additional 13 SRBI paraprofessionals at the K-5 level. We're very excited about that. They'll offer a helping hand to Tier 1 and Tier 3 intervention. 10 interventionists, which are more seasonal, 100-day employees to assist with intervention needs at the 6-12 level. An additional SIOP coach at the middle school level. And our humanities instructional coach, which we lost in the budget a few years back, we're able to hire back with ESSER funds. Also the SIOP coach, we did have a couple of SIOP coaches back in the budget. So we're really just kind of getting back up to those levels. And then our very fast growing, swift growing technology department, we were able to get some additional media techs in to support the numerous devices that we've purchased over the last year and a half. So we're very excited about that. And we are also very excited that we, many of you know, we use Google Classroom as a management system. It's kind of a management system light, if you will, in terms of its ability, its dashboards and back-end supports for teachers and students and families. So we have purchased and we're moving towards a new program called Schoology. We've added tons of laptops and classroom devices, and of course, very much needed network upgrades across the district. And I believe Kelly will talk a little bit about some of the social emotional supports that we've embedded.
Thank you, Kara. So some additional social emotional supports and staffing that we were able to provide to the district due to the ESSER funding was additional teachers across the special ed and pupil services staff. We added several special education teachers due to growing enrollment. The pupil services staff, we needed additional support at the elementary level, and we hired one additional psychologist as well as another psychologist for our new Danbury Primary Center. At the secondary level, we also added a school counselor, and as many of you recall, that was also a recommendation from the NEAS report, and so something we're conscious of doing over the course of hopefully the next few school years. And we also added another school crisis counselor. We have one crisis counselor at the high school, and as the population grows, there is just a greater need for student support and assistance, and so we were fortunate enough to add another social worker to support in that position. Additionally, we were able to bring back our 2 deans of student support. This was a position that we had and found much success in prior school years with supporting and intervening with students and their families. And so that we'll bring 2 of those staff members to the high school. They are 2 teachers that are stepping into these new leadership roles to support students who are at risk of failing, not doing well successfully, disengaged with school, and to try to work with their teachers, parents, and the community agencies that are involved with them to support. We are also, I spoke about this I think the last time we met, if I recall correctly, we were also fortunate enough to be one of 15 school districts across the state to get the LEAP grant. And what LEAP stands for is Learner Engagement and Attendance Program. And the focus of this is to be able to provide additional staffing, resources, and supports, again, for students and family. One of our concerns coming back from a year and a half of very untraditional schooling is student absenteeism and disengagement. And so we will bring aboard 2 social workers. We were just issued this funding a very short time ago, so we're in the process of trying to onboard these individuals, and they will focus on home visits and really going to students' homes, meeting with families, trying to figure out any of the barriers or obstacles to coming to school and providing and intervening with to provide support for students. Sometimes it's a social, emotional, mental health issue. Other times it's a child care issue. Sometimes it could be a resource issue. And so really what we'll do is it'll be an extensive protocol to work with each student on an individual basis and go out into their home. We'll also provide additional training and support for all our pupil services staff members throughout this grant, as well as our administrators, so that we can expand this program when the grant monies go away to be able to continue this support. But we know that this will be a need in the upcoming school year, as it was over the course of the pandemic. Kara spoke about this a little bit previously in the presentation, but one of the focuses of our school quarantine liaisons is to focus on social emotional needs of our students. So in addition to the academic needs, they will also do social emotional check-ins, and they will also be able to notify some of the additional support members on this team if a student or family needs an additional resource. Ann Mead is also working on hiring parent liaisons throughout the district, 1 per building, to support district-wide with outreach to students and families. I will bring more information on this upcoming, but we are in the process of applying for a state social emotional assessment and screener. It's called Aperture. And what this will do is serve as a screener for our district to help with diagnosing and prescribing, just like we do for academic skills, where we might need to have some targeted intervention for students. So this will flag some students that are struggling in certain areas and then allow our staff members to delve deeper with those kids and provide support. So again, once we submit that application and hear back, we're hopeful for a mid-year rollout for that program. So thank you.
May I ask a quick question, please?
Sure.
Kelly, thank you for sharing that information about the LEAP grant. I'm really excited about that for our district. And you mentioned that we're gonna be pulling in an additional social worker. I'm just wondering also, you've got family support positions. How many of those are we gonna have for the?
The parent liaisons, we're trying to hire 1 per building to start.
Okay.
And they will work. There'll be actually 2 social workers through the LEAP grant. That's our goal. Hire 2 social workers, and then to also make available for some of our social workers, psychologists, and school counselors that choose to do so. There'll be some funding for after-school support, so we can use our existing staff beyond the school day to help support with some of our families.
That's wonderful.
And then training for all those groups. So the parent liaisons, the existing pupil services staff members, and of course this new team. We'll also have a couple heads or leads that will help to guide and gather information, because a big part of this will be these 2 additional social workers will work district-wide. So how do we make referrals? How do we track the data? And how do we make sure we're following up with students? One of the requirements of the grant is a pretty extensive data tracking to make sure that our efforts are truly resulting in improving student attendance and engagement in school.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Kara, can you bring us to the next slide? And so, Ms. Cooper, this concludes our presentation. I just want to thank Kara Prunty again for joining us this evening. There may be some questions or comments. We may need Kara's expertise. And of course, I'm going to thank Kelly and Kathy and Chip and Kara for jumping in and helping out with the presentation this evening as well. But we're ready for any questions that you might have for us.
Kevin, when it's appropriate, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Number one, I read an article this morning in the Norwalk Hour, and it was referring to Norwalk schools. They apparently have had the same parent desires about remote learning. And the article basically said the state of Connecticut is not authorized remote learning this year. So is that accurate? Not only is it not required, we're not authorized to do it on a full-time basis?
So it's an interesting, we've had this conversation internally ourselves. I don't know if we really got confirmation from the state. You know, we had a desire earlier in the school year. I think we were very hopeful for days of inclement weather, we could provide remote learning experience for kids. And we were told that remote learning is not an option to count as a day, you know, toward the 180.
The article said the exact same thing about Norwalk.
Yeah, and so it's somewhat contradictory as, you know, providing a remote experience for kids when it's not allowed as part of the 180. But you know, nonetheless, that's kind of where we are right now. And so I, you know, just to acknowledge that question, Joe, because I noted that, you know, there are a lot of families that are requesting the remote remote learning as an option. Certainly understand why, you know, there are varying reasons why families have made this request. And I empathize with a lot of families, particularly after last year. And going through last year, and a lot of families chose to stay home and keep their children home because they didn't feel like it was safe to send kids in. But we are the district that is, we're following the guidance from state and federal guidelines, prioritizing 100% return for students. We understand that there are going to be instances where there are some anomalies as part of, you know, some individual circumstances where we may have to do something different, but we'll take those on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. My last question is, it's Wednesday, school starts Monday. Do we know what our total enrollment is? Do we know how many students were up over last year?
So I can take a look. I'll need a second. I can just tell you that
it's a moving target. I understand.
Yes, and I'm smiling because Karen, Kelly know I'm in meetings for the enrollment. I think I started twitching when you said enrollment, Joe.
I have no doubt.
But our numbers, I mean, Danbury continues to be popular. We're about 950 kindergarten students this year, and 975 kindergarten students already. So one of our wonderings was, were we going to get, for the families who kept their kindergartners home last year, were they going to resurface as first graders and kindergartners? And what we have learned is kind of been a split. So it looks like we're going to be over 1,000 easily in kindergarten this year. And it also looks like we're going to be close to 1,000 in the first grade. But the last time we looked, we were at 975 kindergarten. We anticipate we're going to surpass that number by at least another 75 to 100. And I'm pulling up our numbers for first grade right now. I'm mentioning these two grades because these are kind of our growth areas, if you will.
So safe to say overall enrollment's up?
It certainly has not declined, and just had a meeting with our middle school principals yesterday. Their enrollment continues to grow, and with social distancing and the lack of options that we have at the middle school, I think it's just another reminder that we need more space for our middle schools. You know, we had that realistic conversation yesterday, and social distancing guidelines and no guidelines. We really need space for our 3 middle schools. We need some other options. And Joe, I'll look for this document. I'll circle back and answer that question for you.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Cooper, any other questions from you or board members?
No.
Yeah, I have one other question. Maybe
Okay.
this is for Kara Prunty. Kara, is it the mask mandate is only through October? Or is this for the entire school year?
So currently the school mask mandate under the executive order is only through September 30th. The city of Danbury mask mandate does not have an end date at this point. And that covers all indoor spaces, which would include schools.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from board members? Seeing none, I want to thank everyone for the presentation. and it was a lot of information. And I know it took a lot of working together to put this together. And on behalf of the board, I would just like to say thank you. If there are no other questions or no other concerns, anyone have any question for Mr. Watson or Carol or anyone else, Mr. Superintendent, we're going to.
I have a quick one, Gladys.
Yes, Rachel.
Just a quick question.
Uh,
Once this is approved, will this be posted on the website? And if so, will there be live links within the document? I think the public just saw our agenda, which they can't click on the links embedded.
Yes. I'm sorry, Rachel. Yes, it will be available on the website, and I have not tested it recently, but once you open it on the website, the link should be live, but I will confirm to make
Great.
sure that it is.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, Kate, there's no other question. Kate, would you
I will make
your
a motion that the Board of Education approves the 2021-2022 school reopening plan as presented.
Second.
motion made by Kate, seconded by Al? So we've had discussion, so Kate, you want to go right into the motion as far as a roll call?
Got it. Joseph Britton,
Yes.
Richard Shaleski,
Aye.
Kate Caneva, aye. Gladys Cooper,
Yes.
Lauren Daly,
Aye.
Joe De Silva,
Aye, sorry.
Catherine Hodgson,
Aye.
Rich Janelli,
Aye.
Kathy Molinaro,
Aye.
Al Russo,
Well done. Yay.
and Amy Spallino.
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous.
Unanimous?
Mhm.
Thank you all. If there's nothing else, it's about 8:22. I need a motion to adjourn this meeting and
So
everyone.
moved.
Thank you. Moved by
Seconded.
Joe, seconded by,
Rachel.
okay, Rachel, thank you again. Good night.
Aye.